At this point, a great exercise might be for you to take a piece of paper, divide it up into 3 columns, and title each of those columns the various categories of our effects that we've talked about, which would be time, amplitude, and frequency/timbre. And then what you can do is drop a sample in, whatever you want, and just go through these various effects, listen, and ask yourself, where should I put this? Should I put this into time? Should I put it into amplitude? Or should I put it into frequency? And you'll notice that there are a few effects where you feel as though they could maybe go into multiple categories, which is true. We'll see some multi-effects here. And then what will end up happening is when we go back through, which I'm going to do in a second, and kind of actually answer that question, you might disagree with me a few times, and that's totally okay. I'm putting my effects into particular categories based on how they work from a technical perspective. But a technical perspective doesn't always add up with a sonic perspective. And in my opinion, the more important perspective is probably that sonic one. And whatever you think makes the most sense to your ear is the right answer. So we're going to begin with time effects. And the only true time effect that we have is our delay, because the delay is going to repeat our signal a certain number of times. And we can set this up so that it repeats the signal, and that's what I'm going to do right now, without in any way altering its frequency content at all, or its amplitude content at all. We could just play it back a perfect echo, or multiple echoes if we wanted to do that. Okay, so what I like to do when I load in an effect is just check this in and out of bypass to make sure it's not doing anything. And in theory, if our wet is all the way down and our dry is all the way up, it means we shouldn't be affecting the signal at all. And you'll see that on a number of these effects. As we start to increase the wet, this is the percentage of the effect. So at 0, if we go in and out of bypass,
he's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
We're hearing absolutely no effect there. As I begin to increase the wet, though,
he's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
We have that delay effect, as you can hear. If we want multiple delays, we can just increase the feedback.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
Always be careful, though. If you run this up to 100%, you're going to actually start to run the delayed signal back into the delay again, and that can cause some pretty big problems. And you'll notice if we were to do this for a few seconds on here, and I start with the wet very low.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
You can hear how that's starting to build up and up and up. That can be a cool effect, but just start to pull back on that feedback ever so slightly throughout your track, because it can get out of control very quickly. If we want, we can actually set these to the exact same time so it doesn't have quite as much of a stereo effect as we're hearing right now. And hopefully I can line that up correctly.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
All right, like so. With most delays, we normally see something like a sync option if we want to try to put it to logical rhythmic durations of the beat. Unfortunately, we don't have that here with this delay, and you're going to hear this a lot more with a drum hit than a vocal passage. But if you go to Google and search delay time calculator, I believe this is the first one that comes up, and all you have to do is type your BPM here, hit calculate, and now we have all of those various beat durations of the note. So you can see if I wanted to have an 8th note and a 16th note, I could set 120 and 240. All right, so left time, let's put that around 120. It doesn't have to be perfect. And let's take our right time and put that around 240. And now we basically have a sync delay.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
One other fun effect is to actually pull the dry down lower than the wet.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
So in that particular instance, the delay is louder than the actual signal coming in. And one other fun effect to briefly touch on is the fact that we can turn this into a bit of a chorus effect if we bring our time on the left and right really, really low. Okay, so to a point where we can't even hear that there is an actual echo occurring. So I'll pull the feedback down here, pull the dry up to 100%, And let's see what we
He's
got.
ready for the next step, and he can do it.
And then bypassed.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
So we can almost, again, make kind of a robotic voice effect by having these really, really small delay times. And what that's actually doing is smearing the signal. It's causing phase discrepancies in the actual signal itself. And that's why we get that kind of cool and mushy widening effect. The last parameter is actually the parameter that can turn this more into a frequency-based effect, and that's the filter. And this is a low-pass filter, meaning that as I pull this down, we're going to start to lose some of the high frequencies in the delay, and we're just going to be left with lower ones. So we can check that out here.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
So notice how it's getting darker.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step,
and then
he can do it.
Super bright.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
So you can play around with that further if your heart desires, and I'm sure you'll be using the delays all over the place. The other time-based effect we're going to look at here is the reverb. And if you were doing that exercise I mentioned, you'd probably put reverb in the frequency timbre category, and you'd be right, because it is adding additional sections to the frequency content. It's adding something that wasn't there before. However, the way a reverb actually works is, and this is specific to an algorithmic reverb, is it makes a ton of little delay lines, because if you're in a small room, for example, and you scream at the top of your lungs and it's a reflective surface, your scream and those vibrations in the air, when you're disrupting the air molecules, they're going in all different directions, and they're hitting the wall at all these different angles, and then are coming back to you at slightly different times. And so an algorithmic reverb says, okay, how can we convert that into something that we can digitally process? And the way you do it is with very, very short delay lines. And so those delay lines are all over the place, all in the stereo spread. And that's what gives us our algorithmic reverb. And we have a couple of presets that we could choose. Let's start with Cold Cave and just take a listen.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
And bypass.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
Let's increase the wet.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
If we want to go crazy,
he's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
We can pull the dry down.
He's ready for the next step, he can do it.
Now, if we want to compress this reverb, as in we want to take it away from the left and right channel and try to push it more towards the center, we can use this width control to do that. And for each of your tracks that you have, I'd recommend not having any two at 100% width. Kind of alter that around a little bit, because you're going to give yourself more space, and it helps to focus the listener for each of the parts. So it's okay to have 100% on maybe one or two different things, but otherwise kind of change that up a little bit. It will add some clarity.
He's ready for the next step, he can do it.
As compared to?
He's ready for the next step, he can do it. He's ready for the next step, he can do it.
The damping control is pretty interesting, because to my ear, it kind of sounds like if you increase this, you're actually adding two filters. A low pass filter like we saw before. As you pull this down, we're getting rid of all of those high frequencies and keeping all the lows. But it also kind of sounds a little bit like a high pass filter, as we're pulling this up, okay, everywhere you see color here, that's what we're removing, and we're just keeping the highs. It seems to do both of those with this turn of the knob, and we'll just take a listen to that so you can hear it.
He's ready for the next step, he can do it. He's ready for the next step, he can do it.
All right, and last but not least, we just have size. So how big is this room? Something really, really small?
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
Or something huge.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
So again, up to you. If you want just that little touch of realism of a small room, you could bring this right down. Or if you want it to be like in a cathedral, you could really crank it all the way up if you want to do that. The last effect we're going to look at is the tremolo. And the tremolo, you could argue, could go in a couple different places. I would say this could either be considered a time effect or an amplitude effect, because what it's actually trying to do is bring the amplitude up and down at a set time. Okay, and that's what we control with the speed. We have depth, and we also have phase. So let's quickly talk about what this is doing, and let's actually add the reverb in front of this so that we can make this signal be just a little bit longer. And if I want to move around the order of the effects, I can just hold and switch them like so. So I want a pretty large reverb here, maybe not full width.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
So right now it almost sounds like it's a little bit of an auto pan. You can kind of hear it cutting between the left and right, but it's also changing the amplitude up and down. And you see we have a few presets in here. Here's one that says spinning, so that should be interesting. Let's try that.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
So again, it kind of sounds like it's moving it between the left and right channels. This is all about the speed knob here. I've noticed that the lower you put the speed knob, the more obvious it sounds as though the amplitude is going up and down. The higher the speed knob, the more it tends to sound as though you're cutting from the left and the right channel really, really fast, like an auto panner of some kind. So I'll just play around with this for a few seconds and you'll get to hear the variety of effects that we have.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
And phase is really just kind of setting when is the signal on, when can we hear it, and when is it off, or when is it going from the left to the right.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
All right, so clearly we're hearing amplitude changes there, and I'll put the phase at the beginning so you can hear the difference.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
So this is pretty cool. What if we wanted to add a delay? We could choose to either add the delay, I would say, anywhere actually in the signal, and it's going to change its characteristics slightly. I think I'm going to put mine after the reverb. So I'm going to go reverb into delay into tremolo, and I could even add a second delay if I want to use one more as like a chorus effect after the fact. So I'll put that one at the end, and I'll bypass that one first.
He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
So you can see just how far we can push those delay-based effects. And clearly the tremolo is the wild card in there, and it's going to be our introduction to amplitude effects, which is what we're going to be covering next.